Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. Thanks for watching. I thought I'd do another what's in my camera bag gear review video. This is going to change shortly because I've decided I'm going to downsize a lot of this because I've got too much. Now, I have had comments before, especially in my Facebook group called Canon Lenses and Cameras. Check it out if you are interested in joining the group. But basically, if you've got too much gear, you can't really go out and think I've taken the right stuff with me. And I have so much here that I think while a lot of you will be dreaming about having all this gear, sometimes having too much can be a bit of a curse. But first of all, I thought I'd show you what I've got. So in this nice JJC padded case, I've got one of my big lenses. So without further ado, let's have a look what's in there. So here we have the 800 f11 prime. Obviously I've got camo on it, I've got one of those eye shoot tripod mounts, as well as a nice filter on there to protect the front element. And that's something I will be keeping because 800mm does come in handy for distant subjects. So I'm going to put that on the list of things I'm going to keep, okay? So I'll keep the RF 800. It's a good lens. It's not ideal in low light situations. F11 is a dark aperture. If you're wondering what the difference between apertures is, if you're completely new to photography, just remember that you need to be aware of the exposure triangle. So you've got your aperture, your exposure, ISO, and those three things, when you've got them right, give you a good photograph. So yes, we're going to be keeping the f11 800mm lens. It's a good lens. Now here I have the Sigma Contemporary 150-600. It's a good lens, it's nice and sharp. In fact, in my opinion, it's sharper than the Canon 100-400 Mark II in the corners. In the centre, they're about even. If I was to really pixel peep at like 300%, I'd say the Sigma is a tiny weeny bit sharper, but not by much. You wouldn't tell the difference normally. That's why a lot of people seem to think I don't know what I'm talking about. But the truth is that the Sigma lens is a very sharp lens. The only problem with this particular lens is on RF cameras you see pulsing going off like that, especially at short distances. And what's happening is, because it's not a proper RF lens, it's an adapted lens, basically the algorithm that Sigma put into this lens, even though it's been updated with new firmware, you still get that pulsing going in and out. And the same is true of the Tamron lens, the 150-600 G2. It does the same thing. So this is why I'm not keeping it. So this one is going to be sold, and it just means I've got I've got more options, you know, that I can use other things for. So that will be going. Another lens that I've barely ever used ever is the outstanding EF 70-200 2.8 L lens, IS, 4 stops image stabilization. It's got 2 modes of stabilization. It's a very sharp lens, ideal for portraiture, weddings. I'm in two minds whether I'll get rid of this, so I haven't decided yet. But it's a lens I've only used a handful of times. The only times I've used it is when I compared it to the 100-400 Mark II L lens with 2 times on, just to give myself a comparison. If you're wondering, check my channel out. I've done a video comparing this to the 100-400 Mark II L with a 2 times on it. Personally, I prefer the 100-400. It looks a bit better, but they do about the same sort of sharpness. They're pretty decent. But I'm going to put that over here because it's I don't know. Okay, I've got another lens here which is similar to the RF 800. The RF 600 here is another one I'm not sure on about, but because I'm thinking of upgrading my 100-400 Mark II L lens, I probably will sell that. So we'll put that with the Sigma lens that we're going to get rid of over here. So let me just tell you what's in my bag. Essentially, these things is what I tend to keep around with me. The only thing that won't be in here is the 24-105 STM EF lens that's adapted onto the EOS R that I'm recording on now. I may sell the EOS R because there's no point having two full frame cameras when I'll have another backup camera soon. Anyway, in this tiny bag, thought I'd just tell you what I've got. So in this tiny bag we have a lens you probably didn't expect me to have, which is a Sigma EX HSM Sigma DC lens designed for crop sensor cameras. It's a 2.8 aperture. It's not the greatest lens in the world, but it's cheap, and it means you can put it on a crop sensor camera and you won't have any sort of crop factor happening because it's designed for APS-C. So that's a lens I thought was worth keeping hold of. Keeping in mind I've got a new camera coming soon. I'll let you know about that shortly. So that's a lens we're going to be keeping, so I'll put it with this bag over here. That's the blue bag if you're wondering what I mean. So what else have we got in this little bag? Right, I've got an old, well it's not old, it's a EF lens, 50mm 1.8 STM. It's the Mark II I believe. And that's a nice sharp lens. 50mm is great for your standard visual, what you would see yourself. That's what basically, if you're wanting a lens that replicates what you see as a human being as you're walking along, a 50mm lens will do that basically. So that's why I sometimes tend to keep around quite often. Some people argue with that and say, well, it's closer to 35mm. 35mm to 50mm, thereabouts, is probably what your eyes see in reality. So, you know, that's a lens I keep for low light situations because it's got a 1.8 aperture, massive aperture, lets a lot of light in. And basically, in low light situations, when, you know, when a 2.8 isn't good enough, a 1.8 is better. I'll resort to that if necessary, if it's really, really dark. But we're going to be keeping that, so we'll put that over here. So what else have I got? So I've got a RF to EF adapter. I've got two of those. It's worthwhile keeping those because that's something we need to adapt lenses. So that's great. Now these are EF extenders, Mark III's, the 2X and the 1.4. Handy to have, and this is a must for my newer lens acquisition that we've got in this bag. I'll show you what we've got in there shortly. Another thing that we're going to be getting rid of is the Sigma 1401 teleconverter, designed for the Sigma contemporary lenses and other lenses of that nature. It's equal to the Canon extenders. It really is. It's weather sealed. It's high quality. I think this retailed for about 230 quid. Again, I'm going to be getting rid of that with the Sigma lens, you know, that I will be selling shortly. So we'll put it with those two lenses there. So that's what I've got in this little bag. So we put that with the other big bag over here. Okay, so let's get my big bag here. I do have a much larger bag than this, but this is a Case Logic bag. Case Logic, Digital SLR, Sling, Sango, Bangalore. Basically it's lined with memory foam. It's not a cheap bag, but it means I can get everything in there in a small compact size. Like I said, I've got a much bigger bag. It's massive compared to this, but I don't like carrying a ton of bulk with me. It's heavy, and I like to go with the bare minimum, because last thing you do, you know, like all these lenses, I can't take them all with me, so I'm downsizing. But I thought I'd share with you what I'm doing. Anyway, so that's the case. So let me go through what we've got and what we'll be keeping. So first of all, I'll go through pockets actually, first of all. So the top pocket here on the outside is great for holding you know, memory cards and extra batteries. I always keep lots of batteries. And if you're wondering where to get spare chargers from, go on eBay and buy the second-hand ones. Don't buy the brand new ones, because they'll be coming from China and they'll be possibly rip-offs and fake. Get the used ones. You can get them for about 10 to 20 quid each. And I've got a load of spare ones that I use to charge all my batteries up. I can charge 8 batteries up at once. And since they're used, they're second-hand, I know they're genuine and I know they're going to be good quality. So open the bag up. We've got tons of various pockets for putting various things, and essentially this is what I've got in the bag. So hopefully you can see that there. So in the bag here I have, once I can get it out, the 16 to 35 f4 EF L lens. This is great for doing landscapes. It's fantastic for doing you know, wildlife, scene shots. If you want to set the scene before you take your telephoto images. You can do vlogging with it. You can do a bit of portraiture with it. Obviously, it only goes to 35mm, so it's not ideal. You know, really, the 70-200 is ideal for that. But like I say, I barely ever use that, so I'm still in two minds whether I should get rid of that. But I just wanted to point out that this is an incredibly sharp lens. It's not expensive, between 500 and 600 quid used. I got it in brilliant condition. I just had to buy a lens hood for it, which it should have come with, but you know, that's by the by. It's fully stabilised. If you go for the 2.8 version, I believe it's not stabilised. Well, I think what I'm referring to is the 24 to 70 isn't stabilised, the 2.8, but the F4 version is. Anyway, the F4 version of the 16 to 35 that I have here is stabilised. I don't think you need a 2.8 lens when you're photographing landscapes. I really don't. If anything, if you're going to do property photography indoors, you're not going to be using 2.8. You're going to be using f6.3 to f8, generally speaking, if you're doing property photography. So really, if you're going to do indoor photography, I think that's the only lens you really need, if I'm honest with you. Yeah, there are cheaper alternatives. I think the EFS 10 to 18 is a good choice if you've got crop sensor cameras. But for full frame, you can't go wrong with that. I think it's really the only main option. I know there was an older version of this. I'm not sure what I think it went up to 40mm. I think it was 17 to 40 if I remember correctly, with no image stabilisation, and it's a tiny bit cheaper than this. So yeah, get this if you want to do property photography or you know, landscapes. Anyway, we'll put that because I'm going to keep that. So here, my camera. I'm actually filming on the EOS R. I haven't decided if we're going to keep that or not, but this is my R6. Fantastic camera. Yes, it's only got 20 megapixels. It's got a battery grip on there, so I can get 2 batteries in there, and it works fantastic for fast action. It's actually far superior to the EOS R for fast action. Yeah, the EOS R does have 30 megapixels. This has 20. I've seen people were a bit disappointed when that happened, including myself. But 20 megapixels is still plenty. You know, a lot of people in the wildlife photography world crop the hell out of images. I'm someone that believes you should get it right while you're there, not mess about for hours and hours on your computer, cropping and framing images and cutting them and losing a ton of detail. Do it in the field. That's what makes you a good photographer. You know, you're not really a photographer when you do it on a computer. You know, don't get me wrong, I've edited images myself and sometimes it's necessary, but just like Jared Pollan would say, do it in camera, get it right in camera, and then you won't need to spend so much time editing your images. Anyway, what other stuff have I got here? I've got the 100 to 400 Mark II L lens. I think it's a 4.5 to 5.6 if memory serves me right. It's a fantastic lens, nice and sharp. It's a little bit softer in the corners, just by a tiny bit. So obviously I found the Sigma to be a tiny bit sharper, but it's a lot lighter. That's 2.1 kilogram. I think this is 1.6. The new RF 100-500 is 1.3 kilograms, 300 grams lighter than this. Obviously you have to put an adapter on this, which makes it even heavier, and if you put an extender on, even heavier still. And that's why I've decided to go to the step of basically I'm going to upgrade my lens to the RF 100-500. It's a lot more money, I appreciate that, and so the plan is to consolidate some of these lenses for cash and put it into that new RF 500L lens. So that's the plan when I've managed to come up with enough money for it, but that's the 100-400, certainly worth keeping, but we're going to be looking at selling that in favour of the RF 100-500 lens. Sad to see it go. It's a fantastic lens, you won't be disappointed with it. The only problem I found with it was with some of the older bodies like the 600D, the 7D, the older crop sensor cameras. The focus tended to slow down a little bit, especially at the 400mm end. That's because there's very little power in those batteries to drive the autofocus. If you're running a 1DX, a DX Mark II, DX Mark III, you're not going to experience that slowdown at all, because you've got a massive battery that can drive the autofocus motor really quickly, and you'll never have any problems. It's just with the more budget level cameras, the autofocus does tend to struggle in low light situations. In brightly lit situations, not a problem, but obviously in forests, in dark forests, you know, during sunset and sunrise, you may experience a slowdown in autofocus, and that's mainly down to your batteries being a lot smaller, especially when you're using you know, the Rebels, because with the Rebel cameras they tend to have much smaller batteries, different to the LPR6. No, let me just remember what it's called. Sometimes it misses. I forget about what the number is. LPE6N is the batteries I use for my cameras, but with the Rebels they're the smaller brother of that, and they tend to be quite a lot weaker, which means it has less power to drive the autofocus, and that's why you might think it's quite slow in autofocus performance. It's something I didn't realise at the time when I made some review videos, and some people did criticise me on that point, until later on in life I realised that a lot of it's down to battery power, not just the lens. If you haven't got enough battery juice to drive the autofocus motor, your autofocus is going to be quite slow. So just remember that, guys. The bigger the battery, the faster the lens performs. So that's the lens I will be selling to put into the RF 500. So let's put it over here with these three lenses we're getting rid of. So obviously I've talked about the majority of my lenses. Here we come to the beast. This is something I spent a long time contemplating whether to buy this. I was thinking about the 500 Mark 1 f4L lens, which weighs a lot more than this. This is considerably lighter than that, and it's a lens I think is a must-have. It's about 2.5 kilograms in weight. I've adapted the actual tripod mount and put a modified one on there. What is it called? It's called, if I just take the front cap off, and the lens hood, which is it's like a carbon fibre material. It's durable and strong, and it has rubber on the end. Let me just look at the tripod mount. It's called an LF-C468. I think it's a Heyu, something like that. Basically I got that off Amazon. It was better than the tripod mount that was already on it, because that particular tripod mount was small and it felt like it could slip off my hand quite easily, so I wanted something I could grip. So this is the 2.8 Mark II EF 2.8 L lens. You can put a 1.4 on there, that will give you 420 millimeters at f4. If you put a 2 times on that, it will be about f5.6. Now, when I compared that to the RF 600 at 600 millimeters, and with this having a 2 times on, I felt that the RF 600 was a tiny bit, just a tiny bit sharper, but there was very little in it. You know, we're talking about pixel peeping at 200 and 300% to see that difference. But you slap the 1.4 on this, and it's certainly a sharp beast. Autofocus performance with this lens with extenders was pretty good, I must admit. It was significantly faster than the 100-400 Mark II I've got here with a 1.4 on. Stick a 2x on this and it wasn't that good. But when I put the 2 times on this, autofocus performance was reasonably fast, and I felt it was more than adequate. So, you know, I would highly recommend the 2.8 300. So I would highly recommend the 300 2.8 Mark II L lens. It's basically got 3 modes of stabilizer, 1, 2 and 3. 1 is for all access, up and down, side to side. Mode 2 is panning, and mode 3 is when you depress the shutter and take your picture. That's to save battery power. And obviously there is a limiter on this. The limiter, so we've got a limiter of 2 meters to 6 meters, 6 meters to infinity and full. So there is a good limiter on there. And obviously I got this camo put on as well to protect the lens. Camouflage is a useful tool. It hides you from wildlife, hides you from thieves, you know, makes it less obvious what sort of lens you've got, and obviously that's something I would certainly recommend. It also has a drop-in filter, 52mm, for putting polarizers and ND filters in there. And obviously you've got some focus presets and on and off button and an audible button to, you know, select that, which means you've got 4 buttons that goes around the lens where you can set a particular place in front of you to be in focus. So you can just press that and change the dial. There's a dial on there that turns and it allows you to you know, basically change your presets where you want to focus. You know, it can be handy. I don't, to be honest with you, use it that often, but yeah. So that's certainly a good lens. Talking about the lens hood briefly, it has rubber on the end, as you can see there, nice and solid. It's like a carbon fibre material. It does make your lens look a lot bigger than it really is when you put that on, and it's like a plastic. You can just tie that on, so it means you can pop that down securely on a flat surface and you're not going to damage your lens, because the lens hood is quite substantial. And that's the one thing I will say, all these lenses I've got, this is the best lens hood of all of them, and it's not that heavy of a lens. I could hold it comfortably like this. You won't be able to do that with the 500 f4 Mark II, which is about, I think it's 3.1 kilograms. I think the 600 Mark II is about 4 kilograms. And there are other lenses obviously significantly heavier and more expensive. And this is an EF lens though. And you can pick these up used quite relatively inexpensive. This one cost me £3,000. You can buy you could buy it new for about £6.5, but I think they sort of discontinue this now, because a lot of lenses that are coming out now are for the RF mount. The only problem with the RF lenses, prime lenses in particular, they're really, really expensive. So the RF 600 f4, I believe, is £13,000. The RF 800 5.6, I think that's about £19,000, and the 1200mm f8, which doesn't really seem that bright, does it? F8, when you say f8. I think that's about £23,000, something like that. Extremely expensive RF lenses. In my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, they've just taken a 600 f4 lens, a 600 RF f4 lens, and slapped a 2x extender on it to make it longer, and then charged a load of money for it. Some people would disagree with that. Canon may disagree with that as well, but that's my thoughts on really how they've got to 800mm and 1200mm at relatively large apertures, you know. Although I won't say f8 is really a large aperture. I certainly would be interested in the aperture of 5.6 on the 800 lens, as well as the f4 on the 600mm lens. We're all waiting to see if you're going to bring out a 500 f4 lens at some point, and there are other lenses on the horizon, you know, because it's been suggested that they're going to bring out a 200 to 600, something in the region of potentially 5.6 to maybe f11, something like that. But that's just rumours, there's no definitive answer on that. Now, what I will say on that is, about 4 years ago, Canon applied for a patent in Japan for a 200 to 600 5.6 lens, which never happened. I was quite disappointed when that happened, and they decided to bring out the RF 100 to 500. While I'm replacing my 100 to 400 Mark II with that lens, I am a little disappointed with the aperture of 7.1. So the reality of that aperture is, your aperture is not 5.6 anymore, and it's been reduced. So basically, from about 300 and I think it's 360mm up to 380mm, it goes from 5.6 to 6.3. So basically up to about 450mm, it changes from 6.3 to 7.1. So basically from 450mm to 500, you're roughly at 7.1 in terms of your aperture, which is a little bit disappointing. So guys, something that I was going to tell you, and just before you go, I'll let you know, my next camera purchase is going to be the Canon R7. And the reasoning for me getting the R7 is to pop it on this lens, the 300 2.8 Mark II EF lens, because when I stick a crop sensor camera on this, my effective focal length at 2.8, although I appreciate the aperture may be slightly different as well as the depth of field when it comes to putting APS-C on a full frame lens, we're going to get 480mm effective focal length on this 300 2.8. So it's going to be like a mini 500mm prime lens. And then if I slap a 1.4 extender on this, giving me an f4 aperture, stick the R7 on there, we're getting about 672mm, which is nearly at 700mm, which is going to be fantastic. I don't think I would dare put a 2x on there, because I think it would just degrade the image too much. However, saying that, that's another route you can go. If you didn't want to get hold of a 500 Mark II EF lens because it's too heavy and too much money, you can do it another way, where you put your APS-C camera on to a full frame lens like this with a really large aperture. Because just look at that front element, that is massive. That is fantastic for low light situations, and this is where this lens differs from your f11 lenses that I've shown you. Like this, have a look at this. This is the 600 f11 lens, right? It's f11. That's really dark. Where this might get me 1/60th of a second in terms of shutter speed, this, right, even with a 2x extender on at 5.6 will get me to about 640 shutter speed. There's a big difference there, a massive difference. So this is why the bigger aperture comes to effect. So why would you want a bigger aperture, you might be asking? Well, you might want to blur the background out more, which a 2.8 f4 or even a 5.6 will do for you. The problem with f11 is because the depth of field is so narrow, unless there's a big distance behind your subject matter, you're going to see a lot of what's behind your subject matter. While it will be completely in focus, you'll be able to make it out. And some people consider that busy background unattractive, and some people like it to be blown out and smooth and nice and creamy, and that's why people want the f4, the 2.8, even a 5.6 lens will do that, but you'll struggle at f11 to do that. So that's why it's desirable to have a lens that opens up the aperture significantly. So while a zoom lens will be more flexible, you'll be able to zoom in and out and able to track things easier. That 7.1 aperture might be of concern to some of you people, because that's one of the main criticisms, because at least the 100-400 lens I've got there is a 5.6 lens. At the far end of the RF 100-500, even though it's an extra 100mm, it's still a 7.1, which many people consider a dark aperture. A way of getting around that, you're going to have to open up the ISOs and go a lot higher than you would like, and you may find yourself finding noise. So I'm not a big opponent of people using software like Topaz Denoise or DxO to remove that noise, because it's what's inherently natural in the sensor. You would inherently get grain in your film if you were using film back in the day, and they didn't use anything like that. So I really struggle to find why people want to use software to remove that grain. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with you guys wanting to use software to make images better, and I do it myself if I think the image warrants it. But don't be afraid of having grain or noise in your image, because it makes it look normal, like makes it look natural. You know, taking all that noise out can sometimes make your image look artificial. And one thing I really get angry about, guys, is when I hear about photographers saying, I can remove that twig, it's in the way, it's very distracting, or I can change the background on the right to look more like the left. It's like, photography is about taking images as it is. So photography is about the art of representing your natural environment in whatever you do. So I'm a big opponent of not using software to basically change your image and make it something it was never intended to look like. I know a lot of people remove twigs, remove certain backgrounds and replace it with other backgrounds, and I have no problem with you being a Photoshop artist at all. If you want to be a Photoshop artist and you want to change your images and make it look a certain way, fine, as long as you tell people you've done that. What I have a problem with is when photographers take pictures of something and then they try and represent that's how it was when it's not. When you've manipulated your image, you've changed it into something it wasn't. In effect, you've created a fake image. So what I will say to a lot of photographers out there is try and reproduce what you see in the natural world, by all means, but try and stay away from the becoming a Photoshop artist who will change things that it was never intended to be. Don't get me wrong, I've done artistry myself on Photoshop. I've changed things, made them fantastic. I've changed backgrounds on model shoots and that sort of thing, and that's because I'm trying to, you know, create something that I've never seen before and trying to make it interesting and exciting. But I will tell people that this isn't how it looks in the real world, and I've done this on Photoshop to look like this, and that's where a lot of photographers don't tell their audience that they did this, and I think it's really important that you do, because then people will start to think, well, it looks like that in the natural world, and when they go out and they take their pictures, they're going to be disappointed when they get back and think, oh, that twig's in the way, or that branch is in the way, or the background doesn't look very nice, I don't like the background, what could I have done better? And it's like, you've got to remember that some of these images that these professional photographers take are doctored and censored and changed and manipulated. In my view, that's not a photographer, that's just a Photoshop artist, and I think these people need to be telling you what they've done. Anyway, thanks for watching. It's just something I've got to gripe with, because as Gerald Paulin has always said, you should never be afraid of taking photos of your natural environment as it is. That includes having grain or noise. That includes having that branch that's in the way. That includes having that, the distracting person running along, because it adds realism to your picture. You want to replicate what's real. You don't want to make something that's fantasy, not real. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Hope this was informative about my gear. And then I'll do another one when I've finally got rid of some of this stuff. But one point I do want to make is, you'll find that lenses, cameras are so expensive. And one of the ways you can cut that expense down is look at your lenses objectively and say, right, I've got that lens, I've got this lens, do I need that? Do I really need that? Or is it I wanted that, but it serves no purpose because I never use it? So why leave it there gathering dust? Get rid of it, invest it into something you really want to buy, something you'll use regularly. Like I use my 100 to 400 probably most of the time, and I feel that if I got the 500 RF lens, obviously the 100 to 500, I could replace the RF 600 because I never use it, and combine the two, so instead of having the 600 RF and the 100 to 400 EF lens, put them together, get my 500. Yeah, I'm gonna have to spend probably an extra £1,500, but it's better than spending an extra £3,000, if you see where I'm going with that. Anyway, I hope this video was informative. I know I've gone on for a long time. I do appreciate if you've got to this point. And just remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and before you go, remember to go over to the Facebook group called Canon Lenses and Cameras. I've recently changed the YouTube name of this channel to match the Facebook group, just to make it streamlined. Feel free to join the Facebook group. Just remember to answer all the questions, because some of the moderators will decline your request to join if you don't answer all the questions. Do that and you'll be able to join that 20,000 strong Facebook group, and any questions you've got that's not been answered in this video, go over, ask questions. I may answer, someone else may answer, but you can be guaranteed on that Facebook group to always get the answer you want and need, and any advice you need, any encouragement, any help, hints and tips. They're all on there. They're a fantastic bunch of guys who are there literally to help anybody who needs help. But just don't spam the group, that's all I ask. And no selling gear on that group. That's what Amazon and Facebook Marketplace and eBay is for. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Have a nice day. Bye bye.